I'm a TikTok anchor, and my fans ask me in the live stream, why doesn't my boyfriend break up with me even though he cheats on me all the time? I said bluntly, because you are free. She broke down and pushed me off the bridge, leaving me for dead. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day she asked the question. This time, I said, because everyone else is a hotel and only you are his home. 1. After hearing my answer, Annie was overjoyed. That's right. The relationship between me and him is not something that some bitchy woman can interfere with. While Annie was gloating, she didn't notice in the slightest that the pop-ups in the live broadcast room had exploded. The anchor is playing a stunt. Can't she hear it? This relationship brain is hopeless. My evaluation is a really good match couple, respect blessing. The pop-ups were swiping fast, and Annie's eyes seemed to be equipped with automatic filters. She didn't see the snide comments and the bashing of her relationship brain. She only caught the 8 big words she wanted to see. Respectful blessings for a truly compatible couple. All I heard was her hemming and hawing on the connecting end. She then clunked me 4 or 5 big rockets online. Receiving the gifts, I couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, still have to let go of the help complex. Respect the fate of others. 2. In my last life, as an emotional anchor, I was connected by Annie. She asked me the same question. Why does my boyfriend often cheat on me, but refuses to break up with me? She told me that her boyfriend was a bit handsome, and girls often hit on him and coveted him. Those girls are free, hooking up with a set of tactics. When her boyfriend was drunk, she forced him to have an intimate relationship with him. He is not good at drinking, and this kind of thing happened more than once or twice. I know, also very angry, so I mentioned to him to break up. He frantically retained me, kneeling down in front of me, crying and slapping himself. I also softened my heart. At that time, my brows were furrowed and I could no longer listen. Immediately interrupted her and hit the nail on the head. Firstly, your boyfriend didn't break up with you because it was free. Secondly, there is no drunkenness, only a deliberate plan. At the end, I bluntly and kindly told her, this kind of man is unreliable and can't be wanted. You should break up with him as soon as possible. Perhaps the word, break up, stepped on her minefield. She went directly into a state of stress and roared at me. Shut up. He's been so good to me. Wouldn't he cheat on me? It's those wild women out there who are shameless, coaxing and cheating, salivating over someone else's married man. Besides, he just made the same mistake that all men make. I'm his girlfriend, his favorite. If I don't tolerate him, who will? The pop-ups were all for me. I'm really impressed. What an attitude. The love brain is like this. It's impossible to communicate. It's hard to understand. I suggest this couple be locked up so they don't come out to harm others. Yo. It's all because of the woman on the outside who seduced him. I've learned a lot. Your precious boyfriend is the most innocent. Annie's voice trembled when she saw the flurry of pop-ups on the live broadcast. She was furious and gritted her teeth. Good. You anchor, you're guiding others to cyber violate me, aren't you? Wait, I'll report you to the platform now. From that day on, Annie hated me. She persisted in reporting me many times and succeeded in restricting the streaming of my live room. I had no choice but to go off the air early, and Annie, who is in the same city, didn't give up. She found my company address from the internet, directly blocked to the company downstairs. When I came out of the company, I saw a man and a woman standing in front of the company's entrance from a distance. Under the dim light, their faces were blurred. There was only the sound of disgust, which was extraordinarily clear in the silence of the late night. The woman buried herself shyly in the man's arms and grunted indignantly, and the man immediately stroked her head one after another and said, "Baby, don't be angry. It's all because that anchor is stirring up trouble. Those people in the live broadcast room don't know shit. Do they know how much we love each other? When that bitch comes out, I'll teach her a lesson." Soon after the words left their mouths, the pair noticed me not far away. "She's the one who made me break up with you," The woman raised her volume and pointed at me and shouted. Hearing that familiar timbre, I realized that she was the Annie I had just connected with. She and her boyfriend were raging, and together they surrounded me on top of the flyover near the company, demanding that I kneel down and apologize to them and pay compensation for the moral damage of destroying their relationship. I shrugged them off with 2 words, nuts, and picked up my mobile phone, ready to call the police. Annie's boyfriend, however, relying on his strong physique, tried to snatch my mobile phone. In the process of snatching, he gave a big push and mistakenly pushed me off the footbridge. The rushing river, drowning me, directly buried my life. That suffocating coldness, so that nowadays I still feel that it terrifies me when I think back on it. In a new life, I would not make the same mistake again. On the contrary, I will keep telling Annie. The 2 of them are simply perfect for each other. So, when she was crying and connecting with me, accusing her boyfriend of leaving her at a highway intersection just because of a fight, I urged her to be understanding and told her what she said in her previous life. You are his girlfriend, his favorite person. If you don't tolerate him, who will? She froze for a few seconds and finally huffed out a couple of hmms, reflecting. You're right, I was too willful. She then took the initiative to run over and apologize to her boyfriend. After getting back together with her precious boyfriend, she even thanked me online. Thanks to the anchor's guidance, now we can be happy and in love. 5. In this way, Annie and I became closer and closer over time. She asked for my contact information in private. She even wrote in the notes of her friend application, "You are the person who understands me the most in this world, apart from my boyfriend." After becoming a WeChat friend, I continued to say what she wanted to hear, to the end of the praise. From time to time, she posted little essays in her circle of friends that showed her love. She said that she had adopted a female cat on a whim and was always clinging to her boyfriend and pampering him. She felt that the kitten green tea, secretly jealous, several days moping. Boyfriend knows, without hesitation will adopt the kitten and returned, and said, what makes his girlfriend angry? All bad things cannot want. I on the one hand, inwardly spit, a pair of with cat female race of neuropathy, on the other hand, but in the bottom of Annie friend circle commented, the domineering president came into reality, exclusively favoring you alone. Too touching. This short sentence, hard to control her for a minute. She flipped back and forth, reading it again and again, satisfied. Immediately private chat me said, you still love to tell the truth. Unlike some people who are jealous of us and always want to sow discord. Maybe they're looking at my boyfriend and want to get rid of me, so they can take advantage of the situation. I won't fall for that. Annie was on board with this, and she hated each other, treating me as if I was the only close friend who understood her in the past 20 years. She likes to share everything with me, no matter how big or small. Of course, no matter what she shares. In the end, it all comes back to how much her boyfriend loves her. All her joy seems to be related to her boyfriend, and anger and sadness too. Late one night, she woke me up with a phone call. On the other end of the line, she couldn't hold back her emotions and yelled out of control. A bunch of lunatics. I reminded them about hygiene, but they started a rumor about David. Annie believed in me and was touched, treating me as the only person who understands her in the past 20 years. It's like all her joys and pleasures are only related to her precious boyfriend, and anger and sadness too, and anger and sadness too. Late one night, she woke me up with a phone call. On the other end of the line, she couldn't hold back her emotions and cussed uncontrollably. A bunch of crazy people. I reminded them about hygiene, and they started a rumor about David. David is her precious boyfriend. A few days ago, Annie was not feeling well and went to the hospital for a checkup. The test results said she had HPV. The doctor hinted her in his words, remember to pay attention to your partner's hygiene when you have intimate relations with him. But she didn't understand what the doctor said and thought the gym pool was the culprit. She then posted an ins post about it. In the post, She said with conviction that she had gone to the gym for swimming the day before yesterday. When she came back, she felt itchy and uncomfortable, as if she had inflammation. After going to the hospital, she was diagnosed with HPV. She was so indignant that she tapped her fingers fast. The water looks clean on the surface, but I didn't expect it to be full of viruses and bacteria. However, the netizens in the comment section did not buy it. With all due respect, this type of HPV could only have been passed on to you by a man, she said. It has nothing to do with using the pool. It's your man who's out messing around. Didn't the doctor tell you to pay attention to your sexual hygiene? Break up with your dirty boyfriend and get active treatment, or you'll be in trouble if you become high risk later on. She took a look at the comment section, all of which were clear and unanimous denigration of her precious boyfriend. Plus, the word break up directly touched her bottom line. She went straight for the jugular and swore at the many netizens in the comment section. He's very clean and treats me exceptionally well. How could he possibly infect me with a virus? Do you people have any evidence? Just insulting my boyfriend over here? Okay, I know. You're all the water army hired by the gym to shift the blame. The many netizens in the comment section were also speechless. I take back my suggestion. Do whatever you like. I know you're super in love. Respect you guys. Please stay together forever. Annie was dumbfounded by the dislike, and the more she thought about it, the more angry she became. Ignoring the early hours of the morning, she called me to complain. They are just a bunch of crazy people who don't know what's going on and are making up rumors. David has changed a long time ago. There's no way he would betray me. She said David used to be a liquor salesman, and because of the nature of his job, he was quite eye-catching. He was often seduced by women in the name of drinking, but since he knew she minded, he changed his job. Nowadays, not only is he busy working and traveling on the side, but he is also busy giving her a better life. He's so busy every day now. How could he have time to mess around? I laughed softly on the other end of the phone. How could he not have time? A man can have sex anytime he wants to. 7. After I was drowned in my last life, my soul somehow floated after David for a while. I realized that he was a man who always used work trips as an excuse to solicit prostitutes in other cities. He said in his mouth that he wanted to apply for a doctorate to get a bonus to give Annie a better life, but backhandedly took the money she sponsored to buy information for him to enroll in classes, transferred it to prostitutes, and opened a full service. Just after ordering the service and lying on the hotel bed for the waiting time, he would still call ahead to video with Annie to remind her, "I'm going to study harder for you, so be a good girl and don't bother me tonight." Those 3 words, "for your sake," ruthlessly hold Annie's heart door. She was so immersed in the sweet trap that she never doubted David's words, even for his hard work, doubly heartbroken, constantly PUA himself, to be considerate of him again and again considerate. Of course, I didn't intend to tell her the truth. When she complained about her boyfriend because of HPV, I still said what she wanted to hear, defending David. Don't worry about what people on the internet know about you. You are the closest person to David. You know how he is. He loves you so much. How could he pass on the disease to you? There is no room for doubt in love. Trust is the most important thing. Annie's voice rose a bit when she heard my words. That's right. Those people are jealous of our love and are trying to provoke us. She then praised me. And it's you. You get me every time. On the other end of the phone where she couldn't see, I sneered in contempt. I knew that she wouldn't believe David's lies if I verbally exposed them. On the contrary, she would break down and use it to hate me, assuming that I was jealous of her and wanted to destroy her happiness. And this way, in my case, is not enough to relieve anger. In my last life, I was pushed into the river by their wrong hands. I struggled to the death in the river, shouting for them to call the police and find someone to save me. But they were afraid that they would be held responsible if they attracted the police and hesitated, resulting in missing the best time to rescue me. How cold the river was in the deep winter. How desperate I died. This enmity, this hatred, in a new life, I still can't let go. In this life, I am close to Annie, but I also want to use her hand to first send David, a stinky rat, to the police station for a few days. I will make sure that he will be arrested for whoring and leave a record on the spot. As for Annie, what kind of devastated expression will she have when she sees her precious boyfriend with a prostitute? I'm looking forward to it. 8. Soon, I found my chance. One night at 8 p.m., Annie was bragging about David's motivation. My boyfriend works extra hard for me. He travels during the day, but at night he's still at the hotel seriously preparing for his exams. He just called me to say he's going to work harder tonight. I took the opportunity to encourage her to give David a surprise. If you sneak into the hotel with him at this time, he'll love you to death. This kind of love that runs in both directions is really a permanent killer. At my words, Annie was happy. Through the phone, I could feel the heat in her eyes. She didn't hesitate for long, her voice shaking with excitement. Okay, I'll go and keep him company. I do not have good intentions, took the initiative to put forward just by the way. Can send her over. After all, it's only natural to witness this kind of scene in bed to make it more enjoyable. At the same time, I also emphasized to Annie, the point of a surprise is to take her by surprise. It has to be quiet. Don't reveal anything. She listened. She didn't reveal anything and kept the whole thing a secret from David. On the way to see David, her face was full of happiness and anticipation. She looked happy and eager. At the same time, she was gloating and bragging to me about the good times ahead. My boyfriend is so smart and hardworking. It's easy for him to pass a small exam. When he passes, we'll be married. I'll be the wife of a doctor by then. Thinking of the netizens who advised her to break up in the post not long ago, she raised her voice and snorted. It's no wonder that there are always people trying to stir up our relationship. They must be jealous of me because I'm too happy. I smiled but didn't laugh and continued to brag about her in a hypocritical manner. I kept on describing to her how touched and happy David would be to see her and raised her expectations. I know how much she was looking forward to it and how desperate she was at the same time. For our relationship brain, who thinks of her precious boyfriend as her whole life, there is no greater torment than to be let down. An hour later, I dropped Annie off at her destination. Watching her back disappear into the hotel lift entrance, I raised my eyebrows slightly and picked up my phone to press 110. Hello, I want to report that someone called a prostitute in room 204 of the L City Hotel. In his last life, it was at this same hotel. After David called and told Annie to double up, the hooker who ordered it came on the door after half an hour. He was impatient, and after tossing and turning for 3 minutes, he decided he wasn't having fun and paid extra for the hooker to stay and wait for him to recover. David was weak. 3 minutes of exercise, 2 hours of recovery. Annie went up at exactly the right point in time for their intermission. The hooker was lying completely naked and half paralyzed on the bed, swiping her phone in boredom. When Annie, pretending to be a delivery boy, knocked on the door of David's room and took a few steps inside, she was able to see the scene in living color. And naturally, I didn't want to miss the fun. So I took the scarf Annie left in the car and followed her to the lift. I watched as she knocked on the door of 204 David's room. As she pushed the door open, slightly excited, she shouted the words, "Surprise." David's face turned white. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His eyes flickered because of his weakness. He wanted to stop Annie at the door, but unfortunately, he couldn't. A few seconds later, 204, a sharp popping sound came out. Through the half-hidden door, I saw Annie's whole body shaking. Her eyes were instantly bloodshot and glaring horribly. Her hands couldn't stop trembling. Only her shaking fingers were seen, wiggling around. One moment, she pointed at the naked woman on the bed, and the other moment, she pointed at the man wrapped in a bathrobe with a weak heart. The woman on the bed didn't know why, and thought that David had ordered another whore on the spot, and muttered in a petulant voice to David with a displeased face, "Big brother, You play 3 people, have to add money on. Annie immediately stormed. The whole person jumped on the bed, grabbing the woman's hair, tearing like crazy. Bitch, how dare you seduce my man? The other woman, but a vicious character from the lower class. How could she let her beat and scold her? She broke free in a couple of moves and slapped Annie in the face. Bitch, don't insult my aesthetics. Don't look at your man. If you don't pay him, will anyone want him? Annie covered half of her face, her hair disheveled and her eyes fierce. She was so devastated that she seemed to have lost her mind. She grabbed the things in her hand and smashed them out. They smashed down on top of the wall or floor with a crisp cracking sound. It was a stark contrast to the woman's roar of extreme anger. But even in this scenario, she still didn't blame her kissing boyfriend. With eyes full of hatred, she stared fiercely at the woman across from her and broke down and shouted, "It's all the fault of you cheap bastards. If you didn't stuff his room with little cards, how could he have tried to whore himself out?" David, who had just panicked and was unable to speak half a word, with a twinkle in his eye, he seized the moment and flopped down on his knees. He followed Annie's words and threw out all the blame. "It's all her fault for seducing me in a short skirt. I refused, but she came into my room. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have lost control." Hearing his words, the accused hooker got angry and rushed up to David to punch him twice. Seeing this, Annie, in order to protect her precious boyfriend, jumped right back on the woman. David also stormed out and wrestled with the women. 10. It was a good, funny show that didn't end until the police arrived. Annie initially clapped and cheered at the sight of the naked women in handcuffs. "You've got to go to the police station for these dirty tricks." But when she saw that David was also handcuffed, she panicked. "Why are you cops holding him? It's all because this woman seduced him. Get a clear picture of the situation. Who told you to detain people indiscriminately? I want to report you for abusing your power and bullying civilians." The policeman glanced at her and then, on the grounds of obstructing law enforcement, rewarded her with a pair of handcuffs as well. The 2 silver handcuffs glistened like a set of couple bracelets. Anyone who looks at it will sigh a sentence, "match." In this way, the 2 were brought into the police station. David, because of prostitution, was detained for 5 days and left a record, from now on with a doctoral degree. Annie was verbally educated by the police for obstructing law enforcement. However, it is said that during the education, she lost control of her emotions and cried all the time. The onlookers could vaguely hear a few words from her muffled sobbing, as if to say, "My boyfriend can't be a doctor." 11. After David came out of the police station, he was furious and accused Annie of having nothing to do. "If you hadn't sneaked up on me without a word, none of this would have happened. It's all because of you that I got this case. You ruined my life. Are you satisfied now?" This is his usual trick. Every time he makes a mistake, he can always turn the tables on himself. As a victim, he dumps the blame on Annie. When he cheated on her many times before, he first blamed the woman outside, dressed in revealing clothes to seduce him. And then he disparaged his girlfriend's lack of charisma, both explicitly and implicitly, followed by blaming her for ignoring his feelings and not fulfilling his needs because she was too busy working. The main theme is the robber baron logic of, if you put aside the facts, you are not at fault. David blamed Annie for getting caught with a prostitute, and Annie blamed me. "It's all your fault for encouraging me to surprise him. That's why we got into this mess. It's because of you that my boyfriend won't be able to take the civil service exam anymore. Vitaly, I consider you my friend. Why did you do this to me?" Subsequently, she felt that I had a crush on David, so she deliberately stirred up trouble. So, the bigoted one hated me once again. She cursed at me in my live room and made rumors that I wanted to be a third party. Also, in the major social media platforms, published a post called "Emotional Anchor Vitaly Interfered in Other People's Feelings," and name and accuse me of playing tricks, trying to seduce her boyfriend. This mess led to some Hear the Wind is Rain netizens have eaten melon. Emotional Anchor On the surface to the fans to answer questions. In fact, behind the scenes can do anything. The anchor industry. If you want to read, know all understand. The opposite side of my live broadcasting organization took the opportunity to discredit me. She has a terrible temper and is said to isolate her colleagues in the company. I heard she's an inveterate triad, and she's been dating several male fans. I'm in the industry. She's really not a good person. That's all I can say. For a while, all sorts of gossip and negative news about me spread like wildfire. Of course, there were also some netizens who saw something wrong with it. Loved, this ID looks familiar. I feel like I've seen it somewhere. Upstairs, she's the one who posted about HPV and avoided the gym, but insisted that her boyfriend wasn't sick. I support the anchor. I don't believe that the beauty anchor has such a bad eye, but a lot of negative public opinion pouring into my live room, resulting in I had to be forced off the air. And after coming out of the company, just like in my last life, I was at the door and met Annie and David, who came to settle the score with me. Vitaly, kneel down and apologize. Annie was holding David intimately. You think you can really provoke us with your dirty tricks? She held David tighter as if she was showing off. Don't dream. You'll never be able to shake me. He glanced sehr lightly. Since we've come to this point, I'm going to be blunt with this mouth. The corners of my mouth flicked up with complete mockery. Do you think he cheated and whored around and didn't break up because he loves you and can't leave you? Of course it's because you're free, stupid. Immediately after, I perfunctorily swept the man beside her, cannot hold back the laughter on your man's face. A mosquito bite makes you want to kill yourself. A kiss from a chicken is a workplace injury, and you're the only one who can get away with it. Annie's face turned green, her back teeth clenched. She took 2 steps forward and waved her hand, wanting to slap me. David, who was beside her, stopped her and whispered, "Don't be impulsive. We still have business to do." He then looked at me. "Vitaly, as long as you give me 100,000, I'll consider removing the post and clearing your name. After all, it's your fault I couldn't apply for a PhD. You ruined my life. Consider this money as my moral damage." I laughed even louder. It's none of my business if you can't control yourself. If you can't even control a few milligrams of meat, I'm ashamed of you even if you're alive. 13. David was so angry at my words that he started to push me. Just like in my last life, I was forced onto the footbridge and pushed into the river by mistake. The river was still fast and cold to the bone, but this time I was wearing a life jacket and floating leisurely on the river. Before the 2 men on the bridge were shocked, the police, who arrived in a flash, arrested them on the spot. Immediately afterwards, I was rescued unharmed from the river by the police. In fact, as early as an hour ago, I saw Annie and David, who were secretly hovering under the company's building through my office window. The nightmare of my last life. I wouldn't let it repeat itself. Therefore, I contacted the police in advance on the grounds that someone was provoking trouble. Although I had learned to swim in this life, I still wore a life vest in my jacket just in case. On that day, Annie and David were invited by the police to have tea at the station for provoking trouble. Their blackmailing face was also recorded by the miniature camera I prepared in advance. After the video was posted on the internet, the public opinion about me was directly reversed. Real tragic. It turned out to be 2 psychopaths rumor-mongering about beautiful women. I love it. Her mouth is smeared with honey. It's just my mouth. Whoever scolded the anchor, why don't you come out and apologize? At the same time, my company stepped in just in time. They came up with strong evidence to help me clarify the false information that the other company had fabricated for me. After this battle, I was also blessed by the disaster. The fans and traffic of the live broadcasting room climbed higher and higher, doubling several times in a row. As there were no serious consequences, the police released Annie and David after detaining them for a few days. Naturally, I will not let them off so easily. I have already found professional lawyers and prepared to sue for extortion and defamation. Unsurprisingly, they would soon face jail time, but I didn't expect that before I could file a lawsuit, Annie would be in jail. And the reason? Manslaughter. It was said that David had recruited prostitutes into his home while she was away. Unexpectedly, Annie turned up and ran into her. She lost control of her emotions and fought with the prostitute, then accidentally pushed her off the building. At 18 stories, the prostitute was killed instantly. Annie, on the other hand, will most likely be sentenced to more than 13 years in prison. Through the cold barred window, I saw Annie once again. It's only been a week since I saw her, and she's changed. There was a tiredness and old age that did not match her age. It was a kind of oldness that only comes from living in a cage for a long time. When she raised her eyes to look at me, there was vicious hatred in her eyes. Vitaly, you clearly should have drowned a long time ago. I stared into her eyes without moving. It's you, Annie from the last life. She grunted coldly and just stared at me, a sign of silence and acquiescence. Inside the bars, she was wretched and haggard. I looked at her carefully, feeling ridiculous and pitiful. In a new life, how come you still want to take the blame for him? As the words fell, the face of the woman whose secret had been pierced turned white. 15. In my last life, after I was drowned and washed away by the river, the two of them, shivering and stumbling, fled back home. It was late at night, there was no surveillance at the point of the incident, and there were no witnesses, so no one knew what killed me. David thought about it and decided to bite the bullet that they never saw me that night. So, although they were terrified and jittery inside, they forced themselves to pretend that nothing had happened and went on with their lives as usual. Until 10 days later, when my body drifted to another city and was found. The police, who were as good as they were at solving cases, quickly found the place where the crime had taken place. And David was completely panicked. He was in tears, begging Annie to save him. If I go to jail, my life will be ruined. You love me so much. You can't destroy me, can you? Although both of them were present at the time. But David was the only one who did it. Annie was watching, and before she could do anything, I was pushed down the river. David was relentless. Annie, I beg you, help me this time. Don't worry. When I apply for my PhD, I'll find a way to save you. When you come out, we'll get married, okay? With David's last, almost out of control rant, you keep saying that you love me, so prove it to me. Annie kissed his face and nodded. Okay, with the precedent of my last life, in this life, hearing the news of Annie's re-imprisonment, my intuition vaguely told me that things were not that simple. So, I took the trouble to swindle David in advance. Sure enough, his story was full of holes. It was David who didn't get the price right, got into an argument in the middle and pushed her down the stairs by mistake. And you, Annie, happened to arrive home at that time and ran into the scene. The woman in the barred window looked around fearfully before looking at me warily. What the hell are you trying to do? I didn't answer, but instead asked her in return, is it worth burying 2 lives for him? She clenched her back teeth. Shut up and don't pick on us. She's paranoid and rude as usual, bragging about how much David loves her. She said that a long time ago, her name wasn't even Annie, but David gave her a new name. She says that as a child, she was rotated through foster homes with relatives, whispering and looking the other way. No one cared about her. Everyone just saw her as a troublesome liability. It was David who gave her a home and told her that she mattered. She said that flowers and cake on her birthday were too much for her, but David's presence showed her that none of it was a luxury. He's so good. None of you can take him away from me. Annie lost control of her emotions, and her voice was agitated. I said bluntly, Annie, you're sick. 17. That day, I put the tape of me swindling David in the designated safe and gave Annie the only combination. If you figure it out, it can save you. When I was reborn, I said that in this life I would let go of the helping complex and respect her destiny. So I'll leave the choice to Annie. People make mistakes. They have to pay the price. But she should pay for the rumor and slander, not for David. I, Vitaly, have always kept my grudges clear. In my past life, It was David who got me killed. David deserved the worst. But if she wants to take the rap for David, then I'll stay out of it. Annie gripped the window bars with both hands, puzzled by my actions. Vitaly, what's wrong with you? I said as I glanced at her lightly. I just think you're hateful and pathetic. Annie has always been crazy. She was twisted and paranoid about her feelings, always imagining people on the sidelines with evil intentions, trying to ruin her happiness. David, the man behind the scenes, is responsible for her becoming this way. In my last life, when I died and my soul drifted with David, I heard David brainwash her. In this world, I'm the only one who treats you well. If you leave me, you're worthless. Those who curse me are all jealous of your happiness. Anyone who counsels separation is just stirring up trouble. He uses this kind of tactic to force Annie to lower her bottom line again and again, so that she gradually develops a pathological outlook on relationships. This deformed and bottomless love makes Annie, who lacks love and meets an unlucky man, bury her whole life. 19. A few weeks later, Annie's judgment came down. She confessed to the crime of manslaughter and was sentenced to 13 years in the first trial, and she did not contest it. I, on the other hand, sent David to prison 6 months later for 2 years for attempted extortion. The reason I waited 6 months without delay was that I was waiting for David to be unable to resist his addiction to prostitutes and visit them again. In his last life, it was during this time that he contracted AIDS. Perhaps because he was promiscuous, his body was excessively weak. The doctor said that he could only live for 2 years at most. He was also resentful and took revenge on society. He quit his job and spent his days in discos and bars. Specializing in picking on single, drunken women, he passed the disease on to a number of people. In this life, he'll be in jail, give me peace, and wait for death. But I didn't expect that David would die before I could send him to prison. On a dark and windy night, he was home alone and was stabbed 17 times with a knife. According to eyewitnesses, his body, densely packed, was full of bloody wounds. Before he could get to the hospital, he died on the spot. The murderer turned himself in at the police station the next day. He said that the prostitute who fell from the 18th floor and died horribly was his lover. A 13-year sentence couldn't offset his hatred. What he wanted was for Annie to lose her love just like he did. Life is so ridiculous sometimes. It goes round and round in circles, with all the wrong turns. The man who avenged his love killed the real murderer instead. In the name of love, David buried Annie's life. In the name of love, someone else killed him. And so it was. It was the 7th day after David's death that Annie learned the news. She broke down and cried for 3 days and nights in her cell, then tried to kill herself by banging on the wall. After being rescued by the prison guards, the prison strengthened the protection and surveillance on her. Unable to survive, she was like a walking corpse overnight. But even though David was dead, she never told anyone about the tape that proved her innocence. All of this was just for the love she thought she had.